You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo for another edition of this week's Long Island News, the news show that brings you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. And today, our special guest is Nassau County Executive Laura Curran. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. How's it going?
Good. It's going pretty good.
Yep.
Pretty good.
Another Friday coming here kind of towards the end of the summer, but we're trying to hold on to whatever we got left here out on the island, of course. So I know we're talking about an event returning this weekend that I know a lot of people are excited about, the marathon, a little bit later. But first, we wanted to get your thoughts on some of the more pressing, of course, news topics of the last weekend, a little bit before that. So I think we wanted to start with just discussing where things stand in the response to Hurricane Ida, the remnants that flooded a lot of parts of the county, wound up in that disaster kind of declaration. And I know FEMA has kind of been in the area, trying to do a lot of this kind of assessment. So can you just tell our listeners, where things stand? And I know, you were there the whole time, that waterfall that was described in Great Neck, what you've seen and, where things are now, basically.
Yeah, sure. So, the word unprecedented is being bandied about a lot these days, but literally we had an unprecedented amount of rainfall. We had 3 inches in 1 hour on the North Shore. There has not been that much rain in that short period of time since we started keeping records in 1941. So that gives you a sense of how dramatic it was. And I there were a couple of blocks in Great Neck that don't normally flood. And the folks who lived in these homes said it was like the Titanic. The water was just pouring in. Within minutes, they had 3 feet of water in the living room. And, cars were totaled. So I toured the area, and it really confirmed to me that we need to get FEMA to designate us as reimbursable, to be declared for FEMA reimbursement. So we got that done working with our federal and state partners. Manor Haven, there were mudslides in Manor Haven. I mean, when does that happen? I met this guy, Michael, who lives in Manor Haven. His whole basement was encased in mud. He lives at the bottom of a hill. And, he's dealing with this now. So I'm happy, FEMA is going to be opening an office in New Hyde Park to help the folks, especially on the North Shore. They really got walloped with this storm. And it just, confirms to me that the climate is changing on Long Island. You cannot really dispute that. We've seen such extreme and dramatic weather events. They seem to be happening back to back. So we need to do everything we can to make sure our infrastructure is hardened, we're protecting our water, and we're really doing everything we can to restore marshland that acts as a real buffer for storm surge. Now, Ida was not an issue of storm surge. This was just an insane amount of rain in a very short period of time. So, of course, we're reviewing everything, looking at the drainage, seeing if we can have, maybe better advanced warning systems. So this is something that I take very seriously.
Yep, of course. And I know especially those homeowners who unfortunately dealt with this firsthand, they take it very seriously. And for anyone, I imagine a lot of folks have already gone through this process, but if they haven't yet, it's correct that they can contact FEMA for assistance at disasterassistance.gov, and also by calling, I believe, 800-621-3362. Is that the best place? Is there a county number as well, or?
Yeah, that is the best place. They can always contact our Office of Emergency Management at 516-573-9600. Or you can go straight to FEMA. You can go right online and fill out the form for reimbursement. You can go on site to visit them at the New Hyde Park office. But, it's good just to go directly to FEMA. Now that we've gotten the designation, the relationship with the property owner is directly with FEMA.
Yeah, no, and that was a very big thing to accomplish. I know Suffolk County got declared a little bit, afterwards at the county here, but initially it was just some of the city counties, and obviously the damage, it was very, very substantial in a lot of places. I'll just say anecdotally from, in my work, we were over in Queens where a lot of the damage was, and just seeing people talk about having to save their family members out of their basements while they couldn't open the garage doors because the water was so high and the pressure, was not equal enough, and people had to break down doors with axes. And there's all these very harrowing accounts. I know that's tough enough, but now trying to kind of navigate this process of trying to get, quote unquote, made whole the best possible that can be a little bit unyielding for folks who don't normally have to deal with this type of stuff. So it's great to see, like you said, that there's that FEMA site and that the county can also offer some assistance through OEM. So I did have a question, though, because in the city, where I'm kind of more based on a regular kind of work level, they have the comptroller's office, too, also, where people can also submit claims for damages that potentially might have been caused and they might get some reimbursement for. Is there any mechanism like that at the county level, or is it really just FEMA and primarily, of course, people's private either flood if they have it or, homeowners insurance?
Yeah, it's really the FEMA. FEMA does the reimbursement. We can help navigate, with our Office of Emergency Management. And unfortunately, a lot of those folks who are flooded out don't have flood insurance because they're not, their insurance carrier doesn't make them eligible for it. So we might have to, the insurance industry might have to rethink in this world that we're in right now, who is susceptible to flooding. Obviously, the definition is broadening.
Yeah,
definitely.
There were quite a few thoroughfares through New York that had cars littered all over them. That was surprising because they weren't traditionally places where people got stuck in water.
It was surprising. I mean, we had cars on the side of the road that had to be abandoned, and many of them were totaled. And, we did not have this in Nassau, but unfortunately, we saw in other parts of the region folks who actually drowned in their cars.
Yeah.
It was
in their homes, too.
Yeah, and those poor souls in the basement where the water, was flooding in so quickly that the pressure was so much that they just couldn't get out. And to be trapped like that, what a nightmare! What a terribly sad thing to happen.
Undoubtedly, I was at that site in Jamaica with the family and with the governor, and one of the more disturbing sites I've seen, in my time and government service, definitely. So, like I said, good to see that at least people in government are trying to support those communities that are, so devastated with life lost and also, a lot of property damage as well, which can be replaced, but certainly, is not easy, especially because a lot of people kept a lot of memories, a lot of, family photos and other things that you really can't even put a price on. Sometimes in storage. So, okay, fair enough. And just to your point, because I know you mentioned about the flooding, and obviously this was mostly inland and like kind of at the bottom of hills and like lowlands and stuff like that. I know, Bill, you had mentioned, we were just discussing in terms of like kind of the water treatment process, what can be done? Infrastructure, was established. I know we're talking about these infrastructure bills at the federal level, and I know we'll have on Congressman Swazi next week to talk about that too. But what would you say to them? What can be done? I know it's a 500-year storm, but to try to help, kind of mitigate this or give resiliency in that sense.
Well, county executive, we were talking about wastewater treatment, and I know it was a little while ago that I don't know where the law or the rule came down from. I don't know who actually started it. But supposedly all the rainwater that's collected in Nassau County and Suffolk County, I think, has to run through water sewage treatment plants. And
that's actually not the case. Okay. So our stormwater is a completely separate system. There's the sewage system. And Suffolk has a different situation because they're about 90% unsewered on septics. We're the flip. We're about 10% on septic and unsewered. So we're 90% sewered. So it's a completely separate system. You've got this completely different pipes and everything. You've got the sewage and you've got the storm water and the storm drains. And that water goes directly into the water around us. So, that's why you see so much trash in the collection ponds. It's not because people are throwing stuff in the ponds. It's because people litter on the street. It goes down into the storm drains. It goes through the creeks into the collection ponds. And then eventually, unless it's trapped there, it goes out into the water. So, that's why the plastic bag ban was so important, because it keeps these terribly, polluting items from getting out into the stormwater. But you unfortunately see so many people still littering. It's very disrespectful, and it's not just ugly; it also harms the ecosystem.
Yeah, of course. And like I said, I know Bill was alluding to, kind of these implementations to try to help with pollution in terms of like nitrification, these algae blooms, and there's things that we see that kind of impact water quality locally. But okay, it's good to see that there isn't a correlation, or I know Bill was concerned about any unintentional kind of consequence.
There is something. There's a lot to be said about the nitrogen from the septic system.
Yeah.
So we have embarked on probably the biggest infrastructure project in our lifetime. That's on the South Shore. It's the Bay Park Conveyance project. It's well underway, and that is, I can get technical and boring, but I won't do that on the radio. But the bottom line is, it takes the nitrogen away from the South Shore, away from the marshland. So the minute you stop dumping nitrogen-rich effluent into the bays, the marshland starts to come back. It starts to rebuild, which acts as a storm buffer against storm surge. The marine life, the shellfish, all comes back, which is great for the economy. It's great for recreation. It's good for property values. So this is an exciting thing. Now on the North Shore, that's where a lot of our unsewered properties are, around Manhasset, that area. So we actually have a rebate program. It's a $20,000 rebate program that we're using federal money for. If you want to upgrade your septic tank to something that is more modern, more efficient, and leaches less nitrogen into the waterways, you can get this rebate, this $20,000 rebate, which will cover a big portion of the cost of the new septic system. So we encourage everyone to take advantage of this. There is money available. You can go to nassaucountyny.gov/boostnassau to fill out the application.
Great. That's a great thing to see. Like I said, deal with climate change on the micro level, and obviously, try to deal with it on a macro level with, policy as well. So that's good to hear. And hopefully homeowners who are in that circumstance take advantage of that rebate. So let's remind our listeners, they are listening to This Week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and Nassau County Executive Laura Curran. Having discussed the storm and that, and obviously the kind of climate change concerns around it and infrastructure, let's maybe now discuss your proposed budget, which you announced this week a bit earlier, I believe at $3.5 billion. It still needs to get signed into, accepted by the legislature, correct? And just tell us, what are some of the main aspects of it that, you see as necessary and vital, I guess, there?
Sure. So the year before I took this office, back in 2017, the county reported a deficit of $122 million. So, the county had been plagued by deficits or previously. So, since I got into office, I submitted 3 consecutive balanced budgets without raising property taxes, using fiscal discipline, refinancing our debt at historically low rates. We've been able to accomplish this. And in fact, we got into the pandemic with a pretty healthy surplus. So that helped us stay afloat and actually do quite well, along with refinancing our debt, being very disciplined in how we spend money. So we're actually in a position now where we can provide a tax cut to our residents. We are proposing a $150 million tax cut over 4 years. So the first year would be a $70 million tax cut. And, it's important to me that we do this responsibly. I don't want to cripple our future generations with these kinds of deficit and this kind of mismanagement. So I said to my team, let's see if we can provide some relief to the taxpayers, but only if we can do it in a way that's part of a strategic, multi-year plan that keeps us sound. And we've been able to accomplish that. So as we recover from COVID, there are still, folks who are suffering financially. We want to make sure that we're, number one, being responsible, and number two, providing relief where we can.
Yeah, that's something I know that, rings true to a lot of homeowners, ears out here on Long Island. Obviously, a constant discussion, property taxes and, funding important things like schools, roads and everything, but nobody likes to pay more taxes. So that was, obviously something that, caught a lot of press. And we'll get back to that maybe in a moment in terms of the amount. That looks like maybe 140 a year has been discussed for an average home of about $500K, the owner of a home like that. But also there were some other things regarding increased public safety spending, correct? I think $45 million. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. So we have budgeted 2 new police classes, 2 new corrections officers classes, adding resources to probation and other public safety. And also we are implementing our body-worn camera program, which of course, requires us to do some new hires. We need some intel analysts. We need some more supervision on that. So that is a big bulk of that as well. But it's really important that we invest in public safety. We invest in community policing, especially. I have significantly added the number of community police and problem-oriented police that really deal with those quality of life kinds of crimes dealing with the community. I am 100% opposed to defunding the police, and I think if we fund it correctly and intelligently, we can continue to remain the safest community in America. You know, I was very proud that U.S. News and World Report last year said that Nassau County is the safest community in America. And since we got that designation last year, crime has continued to go down. So I think intelligence-led, community-based policing really does work. And we want to, we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're going to keep working with communities. We're going to continue to invest in intelligent policing.
Okay. No, that's clear and evident. Like you said, that you're not in favor of defunding, given the additional funding that is being kind of sent to that issue, of course. So I'm not sure if you had any specific questions right there. I know you wanted to go back to the property taxes as well, but I guess maybe I'll just one quick thing. What would you say to folks, though, who say that, given the context of police reform, kind of being the issue that it was the last few years, and that we are, quote unquote, the safest big county, that does it make sense to still spend that much money that maybe could have, gone to property tax rebates or something else potentially? What would you say to those might be more progressive voters?
I would say that public safety is the most important thing that local government can provide. And, while we were named the safest community in America, it's my goal that every community in Nassau, every resident, no matter where they live, feel like they live in the safest community. So we have great partnerships with our village police departments, with Suffolk, with NYPD, with our federal partners. Because really, if people do not feel safe sending their children to school, opening a business, or even moving here in the first place, what are we doing? Everything else on top of that is kind of gravy. People value public safety. They deserve to feel safe in their homes. And we need to do it in a way that is intelligent and that is thoughtful. I think a big part of the reason of our success is that we do have good community relations, and we always seek to do better. We get a ton of input. We're always out there, the police commissioner, myself, making sure that we're communicating, making sure that we're involving community, making the community part of the solution. And I think it's that kind of community connection that is a big part of our success. Along with the fact that we have a very well-trained police force, wonderful corrections officers, probation, public safety. We take the training very, very seriously. And part of the training, of course, is anti-bias training, de-escalation. The fact that we had many protests in Nassau County after the killing of George Floyd, but we did not see the kind of really difficult and violent situations that you may have seen in other parts of the country. And I think it's a testament to our police for de-escalating and knowing how to do that. And it's a testament to our residents as well. We're able to come together. People obviously have a right and always will to uphold that precious First Amendment to speak their minds in a way that is respectful to everybody. Yeah,
understood. Fair enough. I guess maybe to segue, if you didn't have anything else, Bill, on the property tax issue, that you were discussing off air, then maybe switching to the new school year, of course, which just, for depending on the school district, started either the week or so before this. What would you say, and what are your thoughts, I guess, on whether the new governor, who we haven't, I don't think, spoken to you since, actually we have, right as she was taking, I think, the helm as the new governor, the mask mandate for schools. I know you were in favor of kind of school district control, but that seems to, have been kind of overstepped in a sense, or not, maybe not the right word, but, superseded by the state's mandate. And I think also it has to do with daycares now, which was recently announced. So what are your thoughts on where that is and where we stand maybe in the pandemic?
Well, I have been hearing, I heard from at least one daycare provider who was not happy with this mandate. We also know that there are some lawsuits pending from the Board of Elections in New York City and other entities as well. So we're watching all of those very carefully. My goal, I have kids in school, so I've got skin in the game. I'm in the Baldwin School District, so I have a middle schooler and a high schooler. They probably hate when I point that out, but sorry, kids. My goal, and I think every parent's goal, and school superintendent and teacher and anyone in the school community, is to have as normal a school year as possible. We want our kids to be in school. We want them to be playing sports, playing their musical instruments, socializing, having fun, learning. That to me is the number one priority. I know that the mask drama is kind of big in the press, and I understand that there's a lot of passion, really on all sides of the issue. But I think it's important that everyone, realize that our shared goal is to have kids and to keep them in school and to do it as safely as possible. We may disagree on how to get there, but that's something that everybody wants. So, I think the governor's off to a strong start. She certainly made her position very clear on this, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, no, of course. That's certainly what we will do. So, and I know we had spoken to the superintendent of the Port Washington School District and of Westbury the last few weeks, kind of getting their thoughts on the ground as the school year went. They basically echoed exactly what you said, trying to make sure that we get this safe return and that, people feel comfortable resuming all those essential, not just the education, quality kind of aspects, but, socialization and, kind of artistic and creativity kind of aspects of the education kind of process, music, and sports and everything like that. Yeah. So that's certainly important. And then maybe just in terms of what's been announced by President Biden, in terms of this employer vaccine mandate for, I think, companies with over 100 employees. I know you and the county have had an initiative to try to go to businesses and offer basically vaccination services on site. Is that still active? And what are your thoughts on that in terms of, does it impact county workers as well, or?
Well, it does not impact county workers because because of the way our federal government is set up. We can make these decisions for ourselves. So at this point, our vaccination rate, we're at 90.5% of adults vaccinated in Nassau County. Yep. So number one in the state, number two, I think I already told, did we already go over that? I can't remember. We're number one of the 62 counties in the state, number two among large counties across the country. So we're doing really well. However,
it's worth repeating.
Yes, we want to get everyone. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. Our direct to business vaccination program is still up and running. So if you're a florist, if you're a hardware store, if you're a restaurant, McDonald's, whatever it is, you can call this number, 516-227-9570, 227-9570. That will connect you with our health department, and you can have folks from our health department come right to your business to vaccinate your workers. And then we'll come back, it's the Moderna, we'll come back in 3 weeks to do the second dose. And this was a great idea that we had, and I have to really thank my health commissioner, Dr. Larry Eisenstein, for making this available. We are getting so many dozens and dozens of businesses are calling, are setting it up. No business is too big, no business is too small. And that's a big part of the reason why we continue to see our vaccination rate go up. We have to be creative. We have to take away barriers. We're reminding everyone that the vaccine is free. Documentation, immigration status is irrelevant. So just sign up, get it done, and that will help, get our kids back in school and keep them there. This will help businesses stay open and society to function normally.
Get back to the concerts, the comedy clubs, and everything else that obviously we appreciate all much more now, with this context of the pandemic. Okay, just the last thing, we've mentioned at the top, there's the Nassau Marathon. Am I correct? That's going to be happening this week. I imagine it was postponed because of the pandemic. You want to just tell listeners about that and, why that's another, feat of kind of Long Island life resuming to normal, I guess.
The Long Island Marathon is back in Eisenhower Park. So unfortunately, last year, because of COVID, we couldn't do it, but we decided to bring it back and bring it back big. So it's 3 days, I should say. It starts tonight with the 5K, tomorrow's the 10K, and then Sunday is the half marathon and the full marathon. So if you're a super athlete, you could conceivably run all 3 days. So there's running, which is great, but we have 19 food trucks. We have live bands, live music, all 3 nights. And after you finish running, you get a free beer from the brewing company that is sponsoring it, Great South Bay Brewing Company, which is one of our sponsors. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's great for the economy as well. So I'm really happy that it's back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, the ones who are the, hyper fit and the ones who maybe just want to have a good beverage and walk around the park on a nice night with some tasty food from the local food trucks. Something for everyone. So certainly go there and, cheer on anyone but that's great to hear that that's coming back and that people can look forward to that this weekend, of course. So I think that's all we have time for right now, but we always appreciate, of course, all your input and time County Executive Curran, and we look forward to obviously speaking with you down the road, of course, soon.
Talk,
okay?
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Take care.
You're welcome. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Alrighty, Bill.
Yes.
So a lot of discussion points there. I know, like I said, there's so much to kind of consider. It's hard to find necessarily the next question at moments. But nonetheless, good to hear her thoughts on some of that. And we can kind of digest it now in a second.
Yeah. Well, what did I read? I think it was yesterday or the day before. We still had 1,000 new cases of COVID on Long Island.
Just surpassed the 1,000 mark again. I believe it was under that for a while, and now it's at 1K. And my understanding again, it's great, and we should certainly I think collectively pat ourselves on the back out here in Nassau County to get to 90% quote unquote vaccination rate. But I believe that is for first dose. I believe Newsday has reported that it's approximately 70% for 2 doses.
Right.
But I get a little lost in terms of where does the Johnson & Johnson count in that and some other things. So that's a little bit above my head, to be honest. But either way, it is still continuing to move in the right direction. And, we certainly are at the top of the tier for those similar sized counties.
Well, I think, we were down to at one point we were down to 0 new cases a day, weren't we? So I don't
know if we got to 0, but we got low, and
now we got 1,000
fatalities,
and now we're
fatalities a day. Yeah. But the big thing is, and to be honest, I haven't looked, this week, but any fatality. Yeah, no, I hear your point.
I'm saying people still have to be careful.
Oh no, and I'm saying that exactly because I'm saying that although the fatality levels are low, anyone who passes away, it's something that's very unfortunate and very tragic to the family and folks involved. But especially because we see in other states too, where the vaccination rate is so high that now not just regular ICUs but pediatric ICUs and pediatric hospitals have been overwhelmed and swamped, and that's a big concern, of course, like we said, with the schools resuming. But still, nonetheless, like I said, it is progress. But no, it's still there. This variant, the Delta variant, certainly changed the game a bit. And the concern is, will others? But my point that I did want to just bring in terms of, like you said, it is still rising and there are still fatalities. But if you look at it, the fatality rates are still lower, it seems, proportionally to the folks who get the infection because of vaccination rates is what I've been reading, at least. So I don't know, take it for what it's worth. But like I said, it still is, still here and still, the context that we all need to consider. But nonetheless, at least hopefully you can enjoy a little bit of a marathon and kind of the music and other things a little bit less stressed, along the way. So
well, people are still getting it, and vaccinated people are getting it. Which is
that's what we talked about, those breakthrough infections with the head of critical care services over at Northwell. And like we said, though, but thankfully, it protects you from the worst outcome, which is, succumbing to the virus or hopefully even having to be hospitalized.
Yeah, one of the weird things, though, is like that idea where they say, pediatric ICUs are filled. And there was one hospital that actually stopped delivering babies. But it wasn't because of the COVID. It was because the staff didn't want to get vaccinated. So they were asked to leave. Or they decided to leave. I don't know how it worked in that particular instance. But there was not enough staff to staff that section of the hospital, which is why they're not delivering babies.
And we didn't get into that too much with the county executive. That would have been a good line of continued conversation, because there's the vaccine. I mean, there's the obviously the mask mandates, but there's vaccine mandates specifically from the state for healthcare workers.
Right.
And the point was that, for the most part, we've seen that a lot of folks, especially the doctors, other nurses and stuff, were pretty early to receive the vaccine.
Yeah.
But that said, there's a lot of supplemental, kind of staff as well, and some who are, those medical professionals who, for whatever reasons, are not willing to, take the vaccine, and it's resulted in these additional legal battles. And I even saw one group on social media tagged me. Not because they were in favor of this, but because they were just kind of highlighting that, I guess at Stony Brook, some organization of some sort, I don't know if it was just a Facebook group or whatever, had organized a Stony Brook kind of like medical professional protest against the mandate for vaccines. So, like I said, it is not an ideal circumstance to see that you can't deliver a baby because the staff are on a strike because of the reason we just mentioned. But, this is what we have to deal with. And, things will get decided in the courts. And another thing we didn't mention with, go ahead.
Well, I just think it's going to be a lot to unpack, Hope I'm around to read the history books, how they...
History is certainly fascinating in the moment, but in hindsight, it certainly will be even more, I'm sure, dramatic.
When you think of the contrast, we have, third and fourth graders, second graders, learning how to barricade doors and avoid shooters in school, and their parents are outside walking a picket line because they don't want their kids wearing masks.
That says a lot there. I know there were, the get under the desk from a nuclear bomb kind of things back in the day. But like I said, I think that there's an extra level of kind of, I don't want to say, insanity, but there is a level of surrealness, that comes with, where we're at.
I keep calling it the upside down, and when I see examples like that, I say, it just reminds me again, we're still living in the upside down. But I was just going to mention real quick, and then we'll get on to the rest of the stories, that we have to recap from the last week. Just that should have mentioned it with her, but I know the executive's spokesperson, I believe Vicky DiStefano, had announced that if today and if the federal government gets the clearance, I believe from the FDA, to administer the booster shots, that's what an advisory panel was meeting today, this Friday as we're recording, about making a decision on. Then the county apparently has the capacity and will comply and will administer booster shots if that's, given the green light, basically. So that's something to watch, and I'm sure we can discuss next week in terms of how that plays, especially because parts of the, other parts of the world are saying, well, we didn't even get enough to give our first shots out yet. So, you guys getting your third shots. They haven't really solidified those rules yet. I've heard different things. 8 months from when you got your second shot is when you should get your booster. Now they're saying 6 months. So it's
that's what they're going to try to sort out today, it sounds like. And, I know there had been some already folks in New York City who had been getting it, but that's because they were in severe immunocompromised categories and other things where, they had already gotten the clearance to do it. But for the general population, that's where the discussion is, I believe, today at the FDA, again, advisory panel. So, alrighty, let's switch into some other things now, and let's see what else we got there.
Well, here's one, John. It's campaign season on Long Island. Early voting starts October 23rd, a few weeks from now. And three of the more interesting races on Long Island are, there's Nassau County Executive. Incumbent Democrat Laura Curran is running against Bruce Blakeman, a Republican Hempstead Town Board member, who was the Nassau County Legislature's first presiding officer. And then we have Suffolk County District Attorney, where incumbent Democrat Tom Sinney is up against Ray Tierney, a former federal and Suffolk County prosecutor and an independent who is running on the Republican line. And then we have Nassau County District Attorney, where Democratic State Senator Todd Kaminsky of Long Beach is running against Republican Ann Donnelly, a 32-year career prosecutor. There are legions of other offices up for grabs, too, including supervisor in the town of Huntington, Babylon, Smithtown, Hempstead, North Hempstead, Oyster Bay, Riverhead, East Hampton, Southampton, and Shelter Island. The county legislatures in both Nassau and Suffolk are up this year, and so are the Suffolk County Sheriff, Glen Cove Mayor, and the Long Beach City Council, which wields considerable power in a municipality that has an appointed city manager rather than elected mayor. And then there are town council members and trustees and clerks and other offices. And don't forget the judges. And here's the thing. Elections in this and other off years rarely generate excitement enough to move the masses to the voting booth. And that's too bad. I think that's something that, we kind of echo here, focused on more local kind of news and stuff at the county and, kind of town level. I know, there was a quote there from someone, saying kind of the obvious. I believe it was some consultant saying that, these elections, they decide, things like taxes, land use, roads, and a lot of other important aspects that impact residents every single day, even more so than, a lot of times the presidential election every 4 years. So
that's something we wanted to definitely flag for everyone as we kind of move, believe it or not, closer and closer to what these elections will be. That's coming up pretty soon. Like you said, early voting will start in a few weeks. And that is the context, too, of a lot of this other news that we've just mentioned here. I know, some people cynical, have discussed, the property tax rebates that's proposed by the county executive, as being sort of a bit of an election move. But, this story was from Joy, I believe, Brown from Newsday. But also the editorial board did point out that, this is nothing unique to one party, that both parties are trying to give away, in their words, as much of taxpayer money to try to help voters, remember that they're, kind of on their side. So, it is certainly, certainly an election time. Yeah. Even though people might not know who the people are on the ballot besides maybe the county executive and some other locals.
Well, that's the thing. We all talk about the stories that grab our eye, but they're mostly on the national level, and so we vote for we'll vote for president, and we go for the national elections, and then we go back home and we scream about the stuff that's happening locally, but those two things are, not directly or not as directly related. Really, your politics is local. The people that are, close to you are the ones who are making the decisions that we all have to live with every day. We saw it with, a couple of things. We talked about that bill that to protect the police, and how that went through, and a lot of people didn't know who the players were.
No, you're right, and that became a national story.
Yeah.
So that's the thing where you don't realize how important something is until somebody else, maybe from the outside, looks at it and says, "You guys know what's happening?" In your own kind of backyard.
Yeah.
You might be surprised.
Yep.
And to that point, we can give an update in a moment on it. Maybe we'll do one other story first, but actually, although, and we didn't speak about it with the county executive, that she did decide ultimately to veto that piece of legislation that was passed, that was sponsored by the legislator Josh Lafazan. Ultimately, that was vetoed. But now, basically the same. There might be a few stipulations that are different, but a very similar bill is being moved through the Suffolk County legislature, which also, my understanding, has, I believe, a Republican majority. So, there's kind of the same questions. Is this going to get passed? Is this going to have to go to the county executive there, Steve Ballone? And will he, get the same kind of, input from the attorney general as Executive Curran did?
I think,
will he make the same decision or not? It's an election year, so it does depend too, on that calculation.
Well, I think the question begs itself: is he going to even ask the attorney general?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it would kind of be shown as it's different than with the first time when you ask the attorney general, but. If you're going back to the well and expect anything different, then I hear your point.
Well, let's see. I mean, the whole idea of because this law that it's under the guise of you making someone a protected class. At least that's the way I understood it, that the law itself.
Yeah, no, it was using the human rights, kind of law statutes for those protections. Yeah. You're right, to then incorporate specifically, quote unquote, first responders, both active and retired. There was a little bit more nuance in this Suffolk County one. You know what? Maybe we'll just go there quick and we'll just give a quick recap. I'm pulling that up right now, and I can just give kind of the highlights of that as well.
Right.
But that bill, like we said, same thing, similar players, where police unions are in favor of it. Activists and, progressives are clearly not, as much as the folks who are more conservative, ideologically, for the most part. But nonetheless, this story was from September 10th. It was by Rachel Blidner and from Newsday. And that was discussing how dozens of Suffolk residents spoke out on that Thursday, so now about a week ago, a legislative hearing against the proposal to protect, quote unquote, protect law enforcement of officers under the county's human rights law, saying that it could infringe on the right to free speech and create division. The same thing, basically, in the other place. Backers of the bill, however, which include the sponsor, Kevin McCaffrey, a Republican from Lindenhurst, say, however, that the measure would give law enforcement the same protections as other groups as they face what he, the sponsor of the bill, described as increasing, quote, hostility from the public. So that's been through some public hearings. And again, that would also apply specifically to police officers, peace officers, emergency medical personnel, volunteer firefighters, and they would have the same protections under the human rights law. But what I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How about having the same protections as every citizen? I mean,
well,
don't they already have those?
No, exactly, and that's what I was going to say right here. That some who say that it's unnecessary and it's a moot point because what you're just saying, they have a specific thing I do want to read in a second here. But I did just want to state first that what the proposal has is that there could be fines and penalties levied against anyone who was potentially found guilty if this passed into law of such harassment. Of up to $100,000 per offender.
Wow.
So that is certainly, not a drop in the bucket. That's not a $200 ticket. That is a lot more than that.
Yeah.
However, to your point, which you just raised, the NYCLU, the Suffolk chapter, along with a number of other organizations out there, they actually, and with the Long Island Housing Services kind of group out in Long Island, they stated that the Suffolk human rights law it doesn't need to be changed because law enforcement are already protected under its jurisdiction because the human rights law as constructed, quote, prohibits discrimination based on lawful source of income. Right. So that would mean any job. You can't, in theory, hit a bus driver because he's a bus driver. If you say that that's why I'm hitting you, you'd already be potentially charged for a hate crime. If you hit a priest or a baker or anyone, and you said, I hate all priests, I hate all, bakers. Obviously, it's silly, but the point is that there's law on the books. You would get penalties. I don't know if it's $100K.
Yeah,
to your point,
and it just seems like when something like this gets into the news, the idea is to, we got to pass another law, and you've already got laws that no one is, enforcing. Yeah, and you know what? I'll get to this part right here. Although the PBA, they obviously say that this is something that they would like, for their members to feel "quote unquote" safer and all those types of, things that you might expect that is their perspective representing law enforcement. That said, it's all pretty moot because as opposed to as we discussed, whether or not county executive, would have made a decision, different than the AG's guidance. Right. Newsday reports that Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone has, quote unquote, signaled that he would not sign the bill if it passes. Right. So, unless something changes, whether there's amendments to it or whether there's, some kind of other unforeseen circumstance, it doesn't seem like, it's going to be the same drag out situation as it was in Nassau. Right. Because, like you said, there already was this kind of template over here across the county line where we're more focused. So, okay, so that was, I thought, worth mentioning because we were discussing it. We can go to another couple of things in the little bit of time we still have left. Remind listeners to listen to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre and myself recapping some of the other important news of the last week or so. I'll just point out Alfonso Castillo, who we had on recently, the Newsday's transit reporter, that he's reported, and there's a story there on our outline that basically says that the MTA has announced that for the Long Island Railroad, there will be no more peak fares for the rest of 21. Yes. They will not be bringing them back. They are making sure that, they're trying to do everything they can to get people to take the trains more and more. So, nobody really liked, missing the window for off-peak by a few minutes and getting stuck with a, peak price, especially if you bought it on the train. But that is one thing that at least commuters won't have to be worrying about, it looks like, too specifically for the rest of this year. Yeah. So that seems to make sense, Bill, I would imagine, right? Yeah, I mean, ridership's got to be down. Although in the last couple of weeks, even the traffic coming to the school here, it's like things are back to normal again. Yeah, in a lot of ways, a lot of the offices, I know we discussed, when will people be getting out to the offices? A lot of companies, that I've seen, kind of just people that I know, and just in general that you're reporting, Labor Day was for a lot of folks that kind of date of, okay, now we're back in the office. Now we're kind of going to finish out this year, see how it goes, and hopefully, we'll stay with this for those folks, I guess, for the next year as well. But I did want to point out, I don't have the stat right in front of me, but I do know that in the last 2 weeks, Long Island Railroad, I believe the Friday before this, reported their highest ridership since the pandemic. Wow. So that's,
a spike. I don't remember what it was, in relation to where a normal kind of daily commute would be, but it was highest since the pandemic.
Right.
And the same was for the system as a whole, MTA. Subways have certainly seen a big rebound, quicker even than the Long Island Railroad, which is not that surprising because in the city, a lot of folks don't even own a car. They relied on the subway system.
Yeah.
But in Long Island, people, they might have the option. They might have 2, 3 cars. They figure, all right, you know what, let me not do the train if I'm not comfortable. Let me take my car in. So that's something that they're still combating, of course.
Yeah. Well, that could, now that you just mentioned that could be part of the reason for the traffic. People not wanting to use mass transit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing where, we've been trying to go away from that for a while, not just because, people don't want to spend, years of their life, comprehensively in traffic, but because of, climate change concerns like we were discussing before, the emissions that come from, cars, individuals commuting alone versus, electrified train lines and stuff like that. That's been a big issue, of course. And I was going to say that, that's related to Governor Hochul, where she's kind of been a little, I haven't really understood exactly where she's at on it, but congestion pricing, which might impact Long Islanders, the ones who have to go to work and commute in the city. I don't know how many people that really is,
right.
But if that were to take effect, that might push people more back to the train, the Long Island Railroad. She says that she seems to be open and wanting it to happen. I don't know what the timeline is, and that's something that a lot of people don't want to happen, of course. Not wanting to pay more money to go south of, I believe, 60th Street. But they have off-peak and peak train rates, so I suppose it's not the most unreasonable or ridiculous idea to have it with vehicle traffic, knowing how much of an issue that is.
And I guess they have the technology to track people. How are they going to know you drove below 60th Street? I guess
that is a fair question. I mean, I suppose, would you do something like what you see on the bridges,
right.
When the tunnels, like those big cameras, and whenever you just see like on that avenue, like in that street, like all of a sudden there's a line of them, and
I guess it could be. Now when you go over the bridges, remember where the toll plazas used to be? They're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So
that's
people
what I mean, just those cameras,
just zooming through. Well, it's actually a holographic reader. So there's all of these rays that come down from that. And they can read your plate, they can read the sticker on the front of your car, so they will know. Well, what are they going to do? Send you a bill? Last year you were below 60th Street 47 times.
I mean, it would be interesting if they did it as a standalone thing. You would think that they could just probably try to incorporate it into the Easy Pass program, as it were. I wonder,
that's an interesting idea. Yeah, I bet you they could. Well, the interesting thing that people don't necessarily watch about Easy Pass is that when you buy an Easy Pass in New York and you use it on New York's bridges, you probably pay the posted prices. But when you travel around the country, your Easy Pass might not get the same consideration as a local Easy Pass. So when you're driving over a bridge in Kentucky, you could be paying, you may not even know what you're paying unless you actually go and look at your statement from...
That's a good point. Yeah, no, I haven't really considered that too much.
It's a great way to make money because people don't look. They don't look at it and don't realize they just paid $35 to go over that bridge. Well,
I wonder if we're getting, people from New Jersey. Maybe they have like Connecticut, New Jersey, like some kind of agreement. I believe I had heard before. But if you're coming from Maryland, you come from somewhere else. Yeah, I wonder if you're paying a kind of spiked, not local price. That's a good question. I hadn't really heard or thought about that too much.
And just talking about that, that's the other thing that is kind of bothersome for me is the idea of red light cameras. There's a private company that looks at that film and decides that you did or didn't go through the light, and I don't know that the notice that you get, I don't know if that comes from the municipality or if that comes from the camera company. I believe it comes from the municipality, but I guess like they have to get the footage and the data probably from a third party. So you have this idea of a private company in the middle of your motor vehicle transaction, I guess. It just seems it's the same thing with the body cameras for policemen. There's a company that's going to be the ones that I guess get to review that film or get it's
proprietary a lot of times.
Yeah, it's bothersome. It's just a little bothersome.
I mean, I hear that. I think the issue is, what's the record of the company usually? Because it's one thing if, they're a, let's say, outstanding kind of entity, and they are a better arbitrator as a third party, as showing a record of being independent. That's one thing, because maybe, let's say, you can't necessarily always trust the county or the town or whatever to maybe do that themselves, because maybe they have an interest in potentially having things be a certain way.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're using a company that either doesn't have a problem with potentially looking the other way or doing anything a little bit untoward. Well, that is a very legitimate concern, especially knowing all the data security and privacy issues that we've dealt with and discussed before.
Yeah, and pretty soon Google's going to own everything anyway, so it's probably a Google company, or
Well, it's all probably using some kind of search engine somewhere along the way, but not really sure. Like I said, that's a little above my pay grade in terms of all the tech craziness that's going on.
So in the neighborhood, and the idea of police reform, we still have internal compliance. There are no civilian complaint review boards. I think there might be one in the city.
Well, no, there is definitely one in the city.
Right.
People criticize, how much does it do? But the point is that certainly is a thing that is in the city, at least as opposed to just internal affairs.
Right.
My understanding is that Suffolk County did not get a CCRB, but they did get some kind of additional oversight mechanism through. I'm not really sure again which specific county agency, but one of the county agencies, either the Human Rights Division or some, that might have been in there, is what I'm thinking. That said that they would have some kind of internal review, on these types of maybe more questionable circumstances, so that they can, in theory, be a fair arbitrator of the situation. So I don't know. I get that. Like I said, people, public safety is number one. People like homeostasis.
Yeah.
You need to be able to eat, sleep, and do basic things, so that you can, make everything better for yourself and for the community.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we know that for a long time, law enforcement has managed to definitely be well funded, we'll say, and some people, like I said, might criticize, do they need the additional resources that maybe, let's say, some other part of government could benefit from, if there are other elements that have already kind of been accomplished. But nonetheless, we want to send more funding on things to teach police to be more culturally competent and to have better training. So it is this kind of
there you go. Still, I think that's the proof of the pudding is what they spend it on.
That's the whole key. And I think that's why obviously the executive was very firm, and a lot of electeds are on not being for the funding, and that's why a lot of the advocates in that space, some still use that for somewhat of semantics and kind of theatrics, but a lot of folks have kind of moved towards reallocating, because that's
defunding was an unfortunate label, and it's really not what it meant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always how it is. That's the semantics game.
I think there were quite a few law enforcement people who kind of liked the idea that they wouldn't be getting calls to go and get cats out of trees anymore. That kind of thing. I mean, it was beneficial to them too. You could concentrate on the job that you thought you were going to do. I mean, I'm all for public relations too, but there's no sense in wasting resources getting somebody's cat out of a tree when somebody else could do it.
I hear you. If you can get auxiliary police, or if you can get whoever, the officer of the peace or whatever they're doing,
because
something like that.
So much on their plate. It's so
Yeah, no, undoubtedly, like I said. So that's something we'll keep watching. And I did want to mention one thing, since we're still talking about police, and then we'll shift with the little time we got still left here. But I did see, and I did want to discuss that with the county executive, but didn't get a chance to, that it's been reported. I got to find exactly who said it, but it was, I believe, like one of the fraternal organizations of like police, that they say now that the number one cause of fatalities for law enforcement is the COVID virus. And that goes to the conversation of, I know in New York City, there've been kind of pushback from PD to say, we don't want to comply with the vaccine mandates, and that's something I remember when we discussed with Commissioner Ryder. He said that he was hearing even firsthand, although anecdotally, that a lot of the guys, they were young guys. They were figuring, why would I need to take it? I'm healthy. If I get it, it'd be fine. And, there's an interesting culture there. So that's something, that I think, needs to be looked at a little bit further, with all the county and all the workforces, but specifically with police, if, they're, organizations which are trusted, they're not defund police movements, they're, PBA, kind of adjacent organizations. And they're saying, wow, this is really taking a big toll on our members out here.
Do you think
across the country,
if this hadn't been politicized, that we'd be dealing with this?
I think that's a very, very reasonable question, because like you said, is there a history of, when the polio vaccine came out,
I was there.
No, but I'm saying, do you remember hearing stories of them saying, well, this workforce or the police or the nurses, they don't want to take the vaccine? Like,
no,
I haven't seen that in history or reporting, but
I think that people saw, look, the people that got polio were in, those chambers with
iron lungs,
an iron lung,
or
and things like that, and I think that the drive to get vaccinated for polio was they just didn't want to do the other thing.
I just wonder too how much being closer to World War II and the idea of like having to give up things and what was defined as quote unquote the greatest generation, for what that's worth.
They knew about sacrifice.
People were more willing to sacrifice more for the quote unquote public good and kind of give up more of those individual things that now
you said it, public good,
less inclined.
I think there was more of a they were just more aware and more empathetic.
Yeah. I mean, it was a different world. There was a draft in place and stuff like that.
I looked back at there's an old picture of I think it's Ebbets Field, and 1914, and when you look in the stands, everybody's wearing masks. Everybody.
Oh yeah, no.
Every person in the picture, and you just say, so then you look at today and say, okay, so if we hadn't politicized masks and vaccines and all the QAnon crap that people were buying, and I don't think we'd be here. That's
a very fair, reasonable, kind of consideration, I think, to have. And we'll go maybe, we got a few minutes here to finish on, I know what you wanted to talk about a little bit more, the national kind of side of it in a second. But I did just want to mention real fast that, and we'll follow this because it's going to take a while here, but the governor, just to tie back to the environmental concerns and, the traffic and those issues, the governor did sign a bill, I believe this week, that actually would ban the sale of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. So that is coming down the pipeline. That will be in compliance with other states across the country. Places like China have already, banned the sale of new only gas-powered vehicles. Other countries like France as well are moving in that direction. So that's something that I think kind of snuck a little bit under the radar.
That's 15 years from now. About 15 years?
It's a while out. So some people might say, well, why take so long? Why not have it be sooner? Others might say,
It's not a while. It's pretty short. It's about 15 years.
Like
2035, it's already
21, 14. So we're getting there, 13 almost.
So I can't continue to drive my 20-year-old car.
Well, the thing is, I don't know. I think you can drive.
I could.
They'll get grandfathered.
I couldn't buy one. I got you.
Buy one. Yeah. So I don't know what happens to used cars. That's a whole other question. I know, for example, in Japan, they have, and not really emissions. It's partially that, but it's just safety, where they don't allow cars after a certain number of miles and years on their roads. They have to be exported out of country. Yeah. So
and they call that for safety rather than some corporation needs to sell you a new car.
That's true. They do have a lot of domestic car
convenient?
Manufacturers. Now that you think about it, you're right about that one.
Yeah. Anyway, I think the clock on the wall is screaming at us. How are you feeling about this weekend's little meeting at the Capitol?
I don't want to give it any more kind of air to the fuel that it could be. I'm hoping that things have been kind of corrected, we'll say, in security practices and everything. So that's kind of what my thoughts are, I guess.
We'll talk about it after we see what happens. In any event, John, thank you very much. You can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 o'clock right here on 90.3 WHPC.